Let me tell you about the moment a 47-year relationship ended not with a fight, not with a scandal, but with a single name. Alex Eala, ranked 31st in the world, 20 years old from Quezon City, Philippines, and as of right now, the sole commercial focus of the most historically loyal automotive sponsor women's tennis has ever seen. Every dollar, every resource, every ounce of prestige that Porsche once spread across an entire sport redirected to one person. WTA officials, they are furious. And I want to explain exactly why. Because the story underneath this headline is far bigger than a sponsorship announcement. Let's start with 1978. A 15-year-old named Tracy Austin showed up in Filderstadt, Germany. Pigtails, braces, and this quiet intensity that made everyone in the room stop talking. Porsche was there, and something clicked that day that would last nearly half a century. 47 consecutive years. That's not a business arrangement. That's a marriage. Through Navratilova's dominance, through Hingis' genius, through Sharapova's theater and Kerber's quiet grit and Swiatek's 5 Grand Slam titles. Through every era, every controversy, every commercial storm, Porsche didn't flinch, they stayed. The Porsche Tennis Grand Prix in Stuttgart became Europe's oldest professional women's indoor tournament. When they moved it to the Porsche Arena in 2006, they literally put their name on the building. Players voted it their favorite tournament in its category 10 separate times between 2007 and 2019. 33,000 people packed that arena in 2025, the highest attendance since the pandemic. Porsche ran the Porsche Talent Team. They donated €100 per ace to Stuttgart children's charities. They had Emma Raducanu as a brand ambassador, Angelique Kerber. They built something real, organic, deep, genuine. When Aryna Sabalenka walked into a Stuttgart press conference and said, "I want to finally win the Porsche this year," it felt like a personal statement, not a sponsor read. That's what 47 years of investment looks like. And then December 2025 happened. Mercedes-Benz walked into the room. What they announced wasn't just a sponsorship. It was the largest single commitment in the documented history of women's professional sport. Starting January 1st, 2026, the WTA Tour officially became the WTA Tour driven by Mercedes-Benz. Title partner, global exclusivity, net post signage at every tournament on Earth. Porsche, the brand that had built women's tennis' most iconic partnership, suddenly found itself in a corner. Now, technically, they were protected. Tournaments with existing automotive deals could keep them. Stuttgart was Porsche's tournament. They'd organized it, funded it, named the arena. Mercedes couldn't touch that. But the broader identity, the most loyal sponsor in women's tennis designation, they literally carried on their own website that belonged to the whole tour. And the whole tour now wore a 3-point star. 3 sources familiar with the internal negotiations confirmed that Mercedes' deal included provisions to eventually buy out Porsche's secondary partnerships at WTA 250 and 500 level events. The timeline was deliberately vague. The tension was not. So Porsche made a decision, not a defensive one, not a grudging retreat, a pivot executed with the kind of velocity that separates brands who build legacies from brands who simply participate in them. And the direction of that pivot, it had a Philippine passport. 1 week before the announcement that shook the tennis world, Tennis 365 published an industry analysis. One line in it reads like a prophecy now. Alex Eala has yet to win a WTA title. She hasn't broken into the top 20, but there is a big reason why she may already be the most attractive option for sponsors looking to sign up. Not the most attractive option among players her age. Not the most interesting rising Asian star. The most attractive option. Full stop. Across all categories, all sports, all demographics, Porsche's commercial team had been reading the same reports. They reached out to her management through channels that people inside her team described as architecturally flattering, as if whoever designed the approach had studied every previous negotiation surrounding her and specifically engineered it to avoid every friction point those conversations had hit. They weren't trying to compete with Nike's apparel territory. They weren't stepping on Babolat's equipment deal. They weren't crowding Globe Telecom or BPI or Locally Juice or the Milo partnership that had just launched on February 22nd at SM Mega Mall, where Milo Philippines VP of Marketing described Eala as embodying a powerful full-circle story and their brand's most complete expression of its champion development philosophy. Porsche existed in a completely different universe. Automotive prestige, lifestyle aspiration, European heritage fused with performance engineering. The exact intersection of speed, elegance, and competitive ferocity that had defined their identity since Ferry Porsche built the first 356 Roadster in an Austrian sawmill in 1948. No one else was standing in that territory. No one else could. And the number they put on the table, $200 million structured across a decade, encompassing brand ambassador duties, a lifestyle collection, fragrance development, and a dedicated Southeast Asian market campaign. The largest individual athlete investment in Porsche's entire corporate history by an enormous margin. Emma Raducanu had been an ambassador. Angelique Kerber had been an ambassador. Neither arrangement came close to this. All of it concentrated on one 20-year-old woman from Quezon City. When the WTA's leadership got wind of what was coming, the internal reaction wasn't polite concern. It was fury. And I want to be precise about why. Because the anger wasn't simply about losing Porsche. It was about what Porsche's decision implied about the WTA's commercial value. Think about the timing. Mercedes had just delivered the largest sponsorship in women's sports history. Billie Jean King herself called it transformative at the ceremony in Stuttgart. The WTA had spent decades arguing that institutional investment, not individual star power, but the tour itself, was what deserved commercial recognition. That argument had finally produced a record-breaking result. And then Porsche stood up and said with its wallet rather than its words, "The institution isn't the product. The human being is the product." WTA officials who'd built entire careers on the collective investment argument watched Porsche redirect 47 years of women's tennis identity away from the tour and toward one player competing within that tour. The concern was about precedent. If Porsche could do this, what stopped every other institutional partner from following? Why buy the tour when you could buy the athlete? Why invest in the framework when the framework's entire commercial value was derivative, derived from the Sabalenkas and Swiateks and Goffs and Ealas competing inside it? The rage was about something simpler and more personal. The narrative was commercially accurate, and its accuracy was precisely what made it so infuriating. Strip everything away for a moment. Remove the fury. Remove the commercial warfare. Remove the WTA officials staring at their phones at 7 a.m., watching their professional morning rewrite itself in real time. What you have left is a girl from Quezon City who began 2025 ranked 140th in the world. She ended it ranked 50th with her first WTA title from Guadalajara, her first Grand Slam main draw victory from the US Open, her first tour-level final from Eastbourne, and a year-end reflection she posted not as a victory lap, but as a love letter to her family, to her team, to her supporters, and to baby Alex, the little girl who made the enormous choice that made the woman possible. By February 23, 2026, she'd reached a career high of 31. She'd just beaten Jasmine Paolini, world number 7, in Dubai, 4th top 10 victory, a statistical pace the WTA's own department described as historically premature for a player at her current ranking. She represented the Philippines at the 2025 SEA Games in Thailand, gold in women's singles, bronze in mixed doubles, and team events. She led Team Philippines to a 5-0 sweep in the Billie Jean King Cup, personally undefeated, securing a promotion the Philippine Tennis Federation called a generational milestone. Vogue Philippines cover, Tatler Philippines cover, Globe Telecom signed her at 8 years old, Babolat Equipment, Nike since 2019, who for her Wimbledon debut commissioned a Sampaguita hair tie, a national flower accessory because someone there understood her cultural identity specifically enough to make that gesture rather than a generic branding moment. She competed in Milo Sports Clinics as a child and returned as their ambassador in 2026, not as a commercial transaction, but as the literal living fulfillment of what that program was always supposed to produce. And Verifiles and Rappler spent months fact-checking fabricated sponsorship stories about her because her community's emotional investment in her recognition consistently outpaced what any verified commercial reality had yet delivered. People were making up fake sponsorships because the real ones felt too small for who she was becoming. Gigi Salmon, Sky Sports' lead presenter, said it plainly at a London tennis industry gathering. In terms of her appeal, the crowds that follow her, she might already be the biggest star. Coco Gauff, reigning Grand Slam champion, whose own commercial portfolio is one of the most sophisticated in women's sports, publicly referenced the Federer phenomenon. The idea that when you play a certain kind of star, some portion of the crowd didn't primarily come to see you. Porsche cited both of those observations in their internal justification documents. They cited the 33,000 people in the Porsche Arena in 2025. They cited Southeast Asia's luxury market trajectory. They cited the verified reality that misinformation flourishes around Eala and recognized that a fan community producing viral fake endorsement stories at that volume represented a commercial intensity no manufactured campaign could ever approximate. Sky Sports, Coco Gauff, Tennis 365, Porsche's own analysts, they all arrived at the same conclusion through different routes, and Porsche moved. What they purchased wasn't an achievement already documented. It was an achievement still arriving. The WTA officials, furious about the pivot, had every structural reason for their anger. Global brands need partner alignment. The Mercedes arrangement deserved the coherent stakeholder ecosystem that would allow it to generate projected returns. Their concerns were legitimate, professionally grounded, and entirely beside the point of what Porsche actually decided. Because at its deepest level, this decision had nothing to do with Mercedes. Nothing to do with commercial frameworks or title partner exclusivity or the protected status of a Stuttgart arena. It had to do with a 20-year-old who told cameras in Dubai, "How many people would love to be in my position? I make it a point every day to really give my all and be grateful for what I have." It had to do with the girl who said at Indian Wells with the quiet authority of someone who demonstrates rather than declares, "I know that I belong here." It had to do with the athlete who described her entire explosive breakthrough year not as a commercial triumph, not as a professional validation, but as a love letter. Porsche didn't abandon women's tennis. Porsche relocated its investment from an institution to a human being and chose the human being whose story most completely justified that relocation. The officials angry about that decision were arguing about frameworks. Porsche was arguing about something older, more durable, and ultimately more powerful than any framework the WTA has ever constructed. So, here's the question I'm leaving you with, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments right now. When Porsche walks away from 47 years of institutional loyalty to bet everything on one 20-year-old from the Philippines, is that the most commercially rational decision in the history of women's sports sponsorship? Or are they simply the first powerful entity willing to admit what everyone watching Alex Eala already knew, that some athletes don't belong to institutions, some athletes transcend them, and the moment you recognize one, everything else becomes secondary? Drop your answer below, because when we come back to this story in 5 years, it's either going to look like genius or confirmation of something even more remarkable.